So we're going to talk about, first and foremost, the mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer. And we're going to open up two chumashim, because the mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer appears twice. One is in Sefer Vayikra, Perek Chaf Gimel, Pasuk Tesvav. And that's in Parshas Emor. Now, if you have another chumash, this time Dvarim, you could open up and we'll compare the two chumashim together. Perek Tes Zayin, Pasuk Tes, and that's in Parshas Re'eh. In Parshas Emor, Sfartem lachem mimachras haShabbos. Please emphasize the word lachem. Miyom haviachem es Omer hatrufa, sheva shabbosos tmimos tiena. And then in Pasuk Tes Zayin, ad mimachras haShabbos hashviz tisperu chamishim yom. And then Vikravta Mincha Chadash Shel Hashem. Now let's fast forward to Parshas Re'eh. Shiv'a Shavuos Tispar Lach. So let's emphasize the word Lach. In contrast to Sfartim Lachem of Parshas Emor, which is Lachem is plural. In Parshas Re'eh, Lach is in singular. Well, let's go on in Parshas Re'eh. Me'achel chermesh bakama, tachel lispor shiv'a shavuos. V'yasisa chag shavuos l'Hashem Elokecha. Notice, which is a second, I think, fundamental contrast between the two parashios. In Parshas Emor, the Sefira culminates with Vikravte Mincha Chadash Shel Hashem, the carbon Mincha, which is otherwise known as Shtei Alechem. Whereas in Parshas Re'eh, there's no mention of the carbon Mincha at all. And a third contrast, I think, which is very fundamental, is that in Parshas Emor, the Torah has us counting days. Tisperu chamishim yom. The Torah also mentioned Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tiena. But in Parshas Re'eh, the counting of days is completely omitted. And all we're left with is Shiv'a Shavuos Tispar Lach, counting weeks. So again, just to summarize, in Emor, there's Lachem, whereas in Re'eh, it's Lach. In Emor, it's Taviu Vikravte Mincha Chadash Shel Hashem. Whereas in Re'eh, it's Vasisa Chag Shavuos. A third contrast in Emor, Tispru Chamishim Yom, you're counting days. And in Re'eh, all you have is Shiva Shavuos, Tispar La, only weeks, not days. Perhaps the key to unlock this mystery lies in the following question. What is the mitzvah of Sefirat? Are we counting towards something? Meaning there's a culmination. And that's called lahaba, lamed hey beis aleph, lahaba, towards the future. Or are we counting each sphera unto itself as an end unto itself? Not as lahaba, but lisha'avar. Lisha'avar, lamed shin ayin beis reish. We have already reached this sphera, and now we're counting it. We're not counting towards something, we're counting something. Let's think about this. We have at the end of Parshas Bahar a mitzvah of counting the years of the Shemitah, so that every 7th year is Shemitah, and we count 7 cycles of 7 years. 49 years, 7 cycles of 7, and then we sanctify the 50th year as Yovel. The Ramban points out that, number one, that sphera is not an individual obligation incumbent upon you and me and him, but rather it is a tzibur obligation, a communal obligation. I'm not obligated to count what year of Shemitah we're up to. Beis Din, as the representative of the community of Israel, will count it. That's point number one. Point number two, the Ramban says that there's no bracha on that mitzvah of counting Shnos HaShemitah, because it's incumbent upon Beis Din. And many of the Mefarshim are baffled as to why a mitzvah which is incumbent upon Beis Din should not generate a bracha. Asher kidshanim mitzvosov al sfiras shnos hashmita. Why not? After all, just like we have a mitzvah of, let's say, blowing the shofar, we have a mitzvah of bringing karbanos. Many of these mitzvahs have a tzibur element to it, and yet we make a bracha. But for some reason, when it comes to counting the years of the Shemitah and Yovel, for some unknown reason, the Ramban says we drop a bracha. Now, one of the Chachmei Ashkenaz at the time of the Rishonim is the Chizkuni. The Chizkuni says that Sefiras HaOmer, in contrast to Sefiras Shnos HaYovel, requires a bracha. And why? Because of the word lachem here in Parshas Emor. What does that mean? And the Chizkuni says something very strange. He says, we drop the bracha on counting the years of Shemitah because the Torah uses the singular in Parshas Bahar. I don't have that in front of me now, so that you'll have to trust me on that for the time being. We'll try to come back to that a little bit later. Just maybe I'll find it in a diff. If I do, it's in your schus. Here it is, in your schus. Vayikra Chafhei. If you have Parshas Emor open, you just turn 2 chapters, probably 2 or 3 pages. Vayikra Chafhei, Pasuk Ches. In Parshas Bahar. V'safarta lecha sheva shabbos shonim, sheva shonim sheva pamim, and then vavarta shofar, etc. And pasuk yud v'kidashtem eishnas achamishim shona, etc. Says the Chizkuni, the mitzvah of counting Shnos HaShmita does not get a bracha because it says Lecha. And he says that Sefirat HaOmer would also likewise not require a bracha if we only had Parshas Re'eh, because in Parshas Re'eh it says Tispar Lach in the singular. Says the Chizkuni, but the reason why we make a bracha on Sefirat HaOmer is because of Parshas Emor. Because in Parshas Emor it says Usfartem. Can you help me out here? Lachem. Do you have it? So again, if we summarize, how are you, David? So if we summarize the 3 parshas that we've opened up, we'll see a striking similarity between Parshas Bahar in the mitzvah of counting the Shnos HaShmita and Parshas Re'eh in the mitzvah of the Omer, of counting Omer. In both cases, the Torah addresses Lecha or Lach in the singular. And the Chizkuni says that has the following implication. It is a sphira without a bracha. In Omer, says the Chizkuni, there's another parsha where the Torah addresses lachem in the plural, and that sphira requires a bracha. The whole thing is just an enigma. So let's turn back to our opening question. What is the mitzvah of sphira? Is it to count towards something, or do I count every counting unto itself? The Chizkuni, and this I heard from my Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik, is of the opinion that whether or not you make a bracha depends upon these 2 possible definitions. Can anybody guess which definition, this is like a matching question, which of the 2 definitions would require a bracha and which would drop the bracha?
Well, lachem is in when we're talking about the past.
Then what? You would require bracha or not? You follow my question, Joe?
Yeah. So you need it because of the past, not because of the future. The lachem is not when we're talking about the korban.
Then again, let's just focus. Again, are we counting towards
Said it
something?
wrong.
Are we counting each thing unto itself?
Each thing into itself.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Now tell me, do you get a bracha on the sphere or do you not get a bracha on the sphere? I'm asking you for a matching. You know what I mean by matching?
Yeah, I know, but the lachem is in Re'eh when we don't talk about the korban, right?
But what do we talk about in Re'eh? Take a look. It says in Pasuk Yud, in chapter Tezayin of Sefer Dvarim,
Oh, I'm sorry. Lachem is in
Chag Shavuos L'Hashem Elokecha.
I'm sorry. Lachem is in Emor. Okay, sorry. Okay, so then it's for the latid for the korban. Sorry.
So I'm asking which one gets a bracha, which one doesn't.
For the future.
What do you mean for the future? I asked you which one, and that doesn't help me.
The one thing for the korban, because you're counting towards the korban because in Emor.
No, I'm saying when you say the one, what are you saying? This one gets a bracha, or are you saying this one doesn't get a bracha? I don't hear you.
Oh, lachem gets a bracha. So
forget about lachem. You're a step ahead of me. We'll get to lachem. I'm giving you two choices and two matching possibilities. Choice number one, you're counting towards something. Choice number two, you're counting each thing in and of itself. Which one gets a bracha and which one does not get a bracha? Forget about lachem. We'll come to lachem.
Okay, towards something.
Which one? I'm asking for the third time. Which one gets a bracha
right,
and which one doesn't get a bracha?
So I guess. Okay, go ahead, Ralph.
David, you want to say something? Which one do you think should get a bracha? And which one should not get a bracha? I'll ask you a question. I'm making tzitzis. When I finish making the tzitzis, I wear the tzitzis. Do I make a bracha on making the tzitzis or on wearing the tzitzis? I made tefillin. Do I make a bracha on making the tefillin or on wearing the tefillin?
Wearing it.
Why?
Because it's a chafetz mitzvah.
Well, that's too much brisket Torah for me in one shot. There's a halacha in brachos that ein mevarchim ella al gmar mitzvah. If I am doing action A in order to lead up and culminate in action B, but the mitzvah culminates in action B, when do I make the bracha? On action A or on action B?
No, B.
Why? What is B called? Can you classify it, define it?
The Gemara mitzvah.
Gemara mitzvah. Now we're talking. We don't have to be briskets for that. The Gemara says, in many places, we only make a bracha on Gemara mitzvah. The Rishonim will ask, why do we make a bracha on B'dikas Chametz? Very fundamental question. Isn't B'dikas Chametz only the Tchilas HaMitzvah?
Yeah.
Or perhaps the Heksha mitzvah? What is the culmination?
Sreifa.
Sreifa. Had you asked me this question about 2 weeks ago, I would have pointed to my window and I would have told you, listen, smell it. Because right out of here, out of this window, we have Yar Yerushalayim, where there are 10 bonfires here. And for weeks after B'dikas Chametz and Sreifas Chametz, it smells over here. We try to close our windows, you know. In any event, the real mitzvah is Sreifas Chametz. So why do we make a bracha on B'dikas Chametz? And here you have the famous Chiddush of the Balatanya, the Shulchan Aruch HaRav. It comes way before him as well. That B'dikas Chametz is a mitzvah unto itself. It's the Gemara mitzvah.
Right.
I didn't find even a kernel of chametz. Did I fulfill my mitzvah b'dika?
Yes.
Yes. You put out 10 pieces? Fine. That's your minhag. Wonderful minhag. But that's not the essence of the mitzvah b'dikas chametz. You know, it's a nice minhag to put out 10 pieces. Otherwise, you feel a little frustrated. I remember one b'dikas chametz, I actually found a piece of chametz. I was jumping for joy. It was behind behind the door, we have a Delet Hazazah, that moves in to get into our kitchen here. Behind there in that little thing, I found a piece of bread. I was like so thrilled. This is the real thing, the real B'dika. So let's get back to Sefirat HaOmer. So what is the mitzvah Sefirat HaOmer? The paradigm for Sefirat HaOmer, as my Rebbe interpreted the Chizkuni, is counting the years of Shemitah. Because we don't make a bracha on counting the years of Shemitah. Why not? Because what kind of a mitzvah is counting the years of Shemitah? Is it a mitzvah unto itself? Do I care about what year this is? No. Torah says, let's look at the pasuk in Parshas Bahar. It says to count 7 cycles of 7, and then blow the shofar. The mitzvah is counting towards something. What's the culmination of the mitzvah? What's the ultimate goal? To sanctify the Yovel. That's called Kiddush Shnas Achamishim Shnas HaYovel. No bracha. It's not the Gemara mitzvah. When we get to Kiddush Shnas HaYovel, Beis Din will decide that we will now blow the shofar and sanctify the year. But on the Sefira per se, no bracha. What about the Omer? Let's open up to Parshas Re'eh. What does the Torah tell me in Parshas Re'eh? Count 7 weeks, and then V'asisa chag shavuos Hashem Elokecha. When do we sanctify Shavuos?
50th day.
50th day. We count 7 cycles of 7 weeks, and it culminates like the Yovel with the number 50. And we sanctify the 50th day as Chag HaShavuos. None of that is mentioned in Parshas Emor. Parshas Emor, the Kiddush of the 50th day as Chag HaShavuos is completely omitted. Then conceptually, what is the nature of Sefirat HaOmer? From the perspective of Parshas Re'eh, it's identical to counting the years of the Shemitah. It's to reach the number 50 and sanctify that 50. It's not a Gemara mitzvah to count the days. Just like in the case of Shemitah, it's not a Gemara mitzvah to count the years of the Shemitah. Says the Chizkuni, you know why we make a bracha on the Omer? Because of Parshas Emor. Because in Parshas Emor, the Torah wants us to count every single day unto itself. It's a Gemara mitzvah. But wait a second. The Chizkuni makes it depend upon whether it says lochem or whether it says law.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? Rav Soloveitchik claims, based on the Vilna Gaon, that when the Torah addresses Beis Din, it uses the singular. When it addresses the individual, it uses the plural, lachem. That's counterintuitive, is it not? Says Rav Soloveitchik, when Beis Din is called upon to calculate the days or the years so that they can sanctify, in this context, the number 50, they represent the entire tzibur as one entity. Hence, the language of the Torah is going to be Lashon Yachid, Lach. Lach addresses Bezdin as the representative of one entity, indivisible entity. I don't care how many millions of Jews there are on the face of the earth, there's only one Bar Chiyuva, and that's the Tzibur, Kwa Tzibur. And the Bezdin will represent the Tzibur. What's the goal of this obligation of Bezdin, of Lach? To calculate so that we can sanctify what we have to sanctify. In the case of Yovel, the 50th year as Yovel, which has a special sanctity, Kedushas Yovel. In the case of Omer, to sanctify the 50th day as Chag HaShavuos. Ad Kan, Parshas Bahar, together with Parshas Re'eh. Now enter stage Parshas Emor, Usfartem Lachem. And the Sifri says, Lachem Shetei Sfira L'kol Echad V'Echad. To such an extent that the Magen Avraham points out in Shulchan Aruch that you cannot have a shliach count for you. You got to count it yourself. It's an individual chiyuv. Every day is a mitzvah unto itself. And the Sefer HaChinuch says that basically we have 49 different mitzvahs. Each day is accounting and a mitzvah unto itself and deserves a bracha. Because the counting is a gemar mitzvah. So if I count the 11th day of the Omer, that is a mitzvah. It's a gemar mitzvah. The individual is not in charge of sanctifying the 50th day. Can I come along and say, oh, Berzon, you know what? I'm going to come along on the 50th day and I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to declare it's Chag HaShavuos. I'm going to sanctify the day. Absolutely not. Baruch atah Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael Bazman. Yisrael means the tzibur. Not you and not me and not him. Not even Joseph. Or David speaking. No. You don't have the authority to sanctify a day. That authority is vested in Bezdin as representative of the tzibur as a tzibur. So if your mitzvah of counting the Omer in Lachem Shetei Sfira L'kol Echad V'Echad of Parshas Emor, then you're not sanctifying the 50th day. That's way beyond your authority. That's overstepping your bounds. You are in charge of counting every single day. And that's why the Torah here in Emor uses the days. Usfartem chamishim yom. Tisbru chamishim yom. Every individual has to count this, day after day after day. And each day is a separate, independent mitzvah unto itself. It's an end unto itself. It's not a means to an end. It's not a hechsher mitzvah. It's not the beginning. It is the culmination. In fact, the Sefer HaChinuch says that you make a bracha on each day, and each day is an independent mitzvah. Now, I'm not sure I would go that far, because it would seem to me that you can't count day 11 if you didn't count day 10. So I don't know about skipping a day. The Sefer HaChinuch has an interesting shita. He himself vacillates about it, but an interesting possibility that even if you skipped a day, you could still count with a bracha because each day is an independent mitzvah. But one thing is clear. Each day is a gemar mitzvah, therefore it gets a bracha. And it comes out now, Rabbosai, according to this, that Sefirat HaOmer is a hybrid mitzvah. On the one hand, Sefirat HaOmer is a mitzvah upon Bezdin, as we see it in Parshas Re'eh, Shiva Shavuos Tispar Lach, and Lach refers and addresses Bezdin, so it's a Chovas Tzibur, it doesn't get a bracha. But there's another dimension to the mitzvah of Sfira, and that's the mitzvah of Sfira Parshas HaOmer, Lachem Shetei Sfira L'kol Echad V'Echad, which is not a chiyuv on Bezdin to calculate the days so that we reach the number 50 and culminate with a kiddush, but rather each day has a mitzvah unto itself. So that now Sefirat HaOmer, okay, now I know, David, you love bris. So if you like brisket Torah, here's brisket Torah for you. Sefirat HaOmer has tzvei dinim, tzvei kiyumim. There are 2 dimensions and 2 elements and 2 mitzvahs. In fact, they're in 2 different parshios. One mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer evolves from Parshas Re'eh. And that mitzvah would not require a bracha. And that mitzvah is not addressing lachem to each individual, but rather lach to the tzibur. And that mitzvah culminates with the sanctification of the 50th day as Chag HaShavuos. And now we have another mitzvah, another kiyum, another parsha. And that's the parsha of Usfartem Lachem in Parshas Emor. That's the mitzvah that's incumbent upon each individual. And that's a Gemar mitzvah. And we have to count each day, and each day is a mitzvah unto itself. And that Gemar mitzvah generates a brach. And that's why the Chizkuni concludes that Sefirat HaOmer gets a bracha based on the word lachem. Because if it's lachem, and it's incumbent upon every individual and every day, then it's a Gemar mitzvah and it gets a bracha. Had it only been lecha or lach in Parshas Re'eh, it would be identical or parallel, let's call it a mirror image, of Parshas Bahar, of counting 7 cycles of 7 Shmitos in order to sanctify the 50th year as Yovel. And that doesn't get a bracha. So it's really fascinating. According to Rav Soloveitchik, it comes out that when it's a Sefira on Bezdin, it's really just a matter of calculating, to make sure that we have the cheshbon correct, so that we can eventually sanctify whatever we have to sanctify, the 50th year of Yovel, 50th day of the Omer as Shavuos. It's Bezdin working and operating in order to calculate and not mess up on the calculation. So, for example, would it be possible, this is what occurs to my mind, that you could have a sphera without a bracha, even though it's incumbent on the yachid? And the answer is yes. If it's incumbent upon the tzibur, on the lecha, then I have no doubt about it. There won't be any bracha. But what if I find a mitzvah of sphera, which is incumbent on the yachid, but it's only a matter of calculating until I reach a certain point? No bracha. It's not a Gemara mitzvah, even though it's on the yachid. Again, if it's on the tzibur and it's lach and it's bezdin, for sure it's not a Gemara mitzvah. And for sure it won't get a bracha.
Anita.
Excellent. You took the word out of my mouth. I wasn't going to call it Mida, I was going to call it Zava, but it's the same thing. A Zava counts Zayin Nikiyim. It's just a matter of calculating. I have never encountered a woman or a posek who says that women should make a bracha on counting Zayin Nikiyim.
Isn't there Havamina Lagat somewhere? I think I remember reading this once.
Yeah, I forget exactly who talks about it right now. I'd have to research that. But Lamaskana, nobody makes a bracha on Sefirat Zayin Nikiyim. And according to Rav Soloveitchik, it fits in beautifully because she's only counting Zayin Nikiyim day after day in order to be able to be matire herself and purify herself at the culmination of the 7 days of Nikiyim, of Yom Ritzufim. There's no mitzvah to count today. Today's number 1. Today is number 2. Now, you know that there are 2 ways of counting in the Welt. I'm not talking about in mitzvahs, just in general, in the world. There's what's called cardinal numbers and ordinal numbers.
Yeah.
You familiar with that?
Yeah.
Like, for example, if I say this is the 2nd, right, that's called ordinal numbers, meaning there's an order here. There's 1st, there's 2nd, there's 3rd, there's 4th. Then there's something called cardinal numbers. 1, 2, 3. Now, in Sefirat HaOmer, it's really interesting We say Shnei Yomim LaOmer. We don't say Yom Sheni LaOmer. Am I right? So we forfeit ordinal numbers in favor of cardinal numbers. According to the Chizkuni, the way the Rav interprets the Chizkuni, it makes sense beautifully. Because I'm not saying that this is the second day of the Omer, and then the third day of the Omer, the fourth day, in order to culminate with day number 49, the 49th day of the Omer. I'm saying that today is day 2. Shnei Yomim LaOmer, not Yom HaSheni LaOmer. Now, how do we count days of the week? Do you remember by any chance, so I don't have to get a sitter? I think we use ordinal numbers, right? Hayom Rishon, Hayom Yom Sheni, am I right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Because ordinal numbers means we want to culminate. We're counting towards what?
Shabbos.
Towards Shabbos. In fact, the Shita Beit Shammai, that even on the first day, we're already preparing for Shabbos. So in ordinal numbers, we don't make a bracha. In cardinal numbers, we make a bracha. Because ordinal numbers is a sequence to culminate, and it's not a Gemara mitzvah, no bracha. But in cardinal numbers, where each number stops there, this is day 2. I don't know if this is going to be day 3. That's not relevant. That's a Gemara mitzvah. That gets a bracha. That's cardinal numbers. There used to be a baseball team. What city was it? Were they from? The Cardinals, no?
St. Louis.
St. Louis Cardinals. Okay. We got something good from St. Louis. All right. My father, Zichron Livracha, used to say the following. Which is greater, 2 or 3? Answer?
Depends where you're
3.
looking towards.
No, I'm saying, which is greater? Let's say I give you money, right? You want 2 or you want 3?
3.
3. So which is greater, 1 or 49? 49, right?
Yeah.
But which is greater, the first or the 49th?
First.
The first. 49th. You're in a race, right? I hate to tell you, buddy, but you came in 49th. That's not very good. I want to come in first. So if I count ordinal numbers, then I'm really, in a sense, going down. I'm sort of diminishing it. I had the first, and now I'm up to the second, until I finally come in 49th. Like the turtle, I don't know, it comes in 49th in the race. Holding a little Israeli flag there. We don't want to be 49th, but 49 is greater than 1. And then my father used to add another piece. He used to say, did you ever watch a teller in a bank count money? They count fantastical sums of money with no emotion whatsoever. Now they have machines, they just put in the machine and the machine counts the money. Why? If I was counting money, I would get very emotional. If I got up to $1 million, I might even afford a house in Clanton Park. You know what I mean? If I could count my money. Or in B'nai Torah, what I'm saying? Or Vaga, what's it called?
Vaughn,
yeah, near the Bayit. Why is a teller so unemotional about counting major sums of money? So my father said, it's not there. It's partial. I'm not counting my own money. That's the thing about Sefirat HaOmer. Every time I count a day, 2 is greater than 1, 3 is greater than 2, 11 is greater than 10. I'm climbing a ladder. I'm excited about that. I've got 11 days of accomplishment behind me. Not $10,000, but $11,000. And tomorrow, okay, it's not yet Shkia, so I can say It's going to be $12,000.
So Rav, I'm just going with this concept. Why don't we have, for, let's say, a Nazir who's doing 30 days, he asks for himself 30 days Nazirus. Why should he not be counting the days? And also during Aser Shemei Tshuva, why should we not count each day?
Again, if you give a Nazir a page and he writes like this and like this and like this and like this, and then he puts an X across it, you know what I mean?
But he's each day he's not counting towards the end of his Nazirus. Each day of a Nazir, but he shouldn't be. He should be looking at each day as having its own special kedusha, because at the end he's counting towards something which is not good. He's going to leave his Nazirus.
Maybe philosophically you could say such a thing. With every day of Nazirus he reaches a higher goal. But the counting of the days of Nazirus is only important because when he finishes the counting of 30 days, he's got to bring a Zroa, and he's got he's got to bring a korban chatos and a korban shlomim, etc., etc. You know what I'm saying? He's got to purify himself. He's got to burn his hair, tiglachas mitzora. And Nazir is counting so that he can ultimately make the transition from Nazirus back to regular, ordinary life, back to being Clark Kent, if you follow me. And so his counting is like putting a line here, a line here, a line here, and then cross it over. You know what I'm saying? It's just a calculation. It's just a cheshbon. The Torah never obligated a Nazir to count each day. That's what's unique about Parshas Emor with regard to HaOmer. The Torah required us to count every single day. Again, philosophically, like you say before, Joe, it's a new Kedusha. Every day is a new Kedusha. If you learn a little Breslov, every day is a new world, a new birth. Forget about yesterday. Forget about what bogs you down from yesterday. Start the day. It's we used to, as kids, we used to play with something called Escher sketch. I'm really dating myself. I don't know why that went out of vogue. That was like my favorite toy as a child. And you just shake it up, and all the lines and everything, they go nuts. Start a brand new slate. That's a real lesson in tshuva. I want to start anew. I don't want to get boggled down and keep remembering what I didn't do yesterday and what I did 3 years ago, and I could have done better. And you have to do tshuva, of course. But moving forward, you want to count the brand new day. Yeah. So philosophically, you could say about Nazir, like you say, Joe, the same thing. But that's only in Drush. In Halacha, I don't know that the Torah ever obligated a Nazir to count the days. And if it did, I would say the Torah is telling him to keep a cheshbon so he knows when he has to make the transition from Nazirus back to being a regular Jew. But I think what's brilliant here, what opens up in front of our eyes, is the Sefirat HaOmer as a twofold mitzvah. It's a hybrid mitzvah. I mean, who would say such a thing? It's wild. It's brand new. To say that there are two parshas of Sefirat HaOmer, each parsha is a mitzvah and a dimension unto itself, and they're fundamentally different one from the other. The Chizkuni says Nafkamin is a bracha. But again, the bracha here is, I'm not building my whole discussion with you based on the bracha. The bracha is what I call a litmus test. It's an indicator. And it's an indicator of Gmar Mitzvah, because if it's not Gmar Mitzvah, then we don't make a bracha on something that's less than Gmar Mitzvah, which sets up Sefirat HaOmer in a two-dimensional fashion. It's very complex. And it has one dimension, which is a Gemara Mitzvah. One dimension is just a preparation to lead to a conclusion. If you look, for example, at page 209, which David was kind enough to send out, and I apologize, I didn't get it to him yesterday. You'll see that our good buddy, Rabbi Mirsky, Shlita, Rabbi Yitzchak, he starts his opening line that kol ma'isa sfira nira kedavar she'eino tachlis liatmo. Ela ma'isa ha'mishamesh ledavar acher. He's right, in my humble opinion, based on what I heard from my Rebbe, but he's wrong. What do I mean he's right and he's wrong? He's correct if he's quoting Parshas Re'eh, because from the perspective of Parshas Re'eh, it's a Maisa HaMeshamesh L'Davar Acher, namely to sanctify the 50th day as Chag HaShvuos. But he quotes Parshas Emor. And he says that in Parshas Emor, we have a Maisa Sfira HaMeshamesh L'Davar Echad. And Sheyislach Li, again, I'm a big fan of his, you know that, and I love him. But that's not right. I would just change one line here in his opening paragraph. If he wouldn't have quoted Parshas Emor, but rather Parshas Re'eh, I'd be very happy. I'd be jumping for joy. It's Meshamesh Davar Acher. And then Afkamina is the Chizkuni's bracha. Then he goes on to a discussion about whether there's a mitzvah counting weeks and counting days. And Bisman Shabbos HaMikdash Kayim, we had a double mitzvah counting days and counting weeks. Bisman Hazeh, without the Mikdash, we have a mitzvah counting days and not weeks. Fine, that's a discussion unto itself. Okay, Ramos, I think I'm going to stop here if I have your permission. I gave it my all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I hope you got something out of it. It's really, it's mine. It's like opens your mind, you know.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
What does the Bahag do with all of this when he claims if you miss a day, you can't continue with bracha?
Yeah, the Bahag seems to be assuming that even if I grant you that every day is a separate mitzvah, and it's a Gemara mitzvah, but what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is counting. What does that mean, counting? You can't count the day. That's not called counting. Counting means yesterday was so-and-so, today is so-and-so. In fact, if you look at the Sefer HaChinuch, you have to get the right edition, not the classic Sefer HaChinuch, but the more modern Sefer HaChinuch, which I have somewhere here in this room, but don't ask me to find it. So he quotes another nusach, probably from a manuscript that doesn't appear in the old classic Sefer HaChinuch. You won't find it. He says if you forgot a day, then tomorrow you count yesterday, and then you count today. So, for example, let's say I forgot to count 10. So then, according to the Ksav Yad in the Sefer HaChinuch, I count today, and I start with yesterday. I say, yesterday was the 10th, which I didn't count, and today is the 11th, because I missed the 10th.
Uh-huh.
You see clearly that the mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer is each day is built on the day before, and the day before, and the day before. It's a building in which we climb higher and higher.
Uh-huh.
So it could be if I skipped a day, I could count yesterday and today. That's according to Ksav Yad. The other Rishonim will say no. Even though every day is a mitzvah unto itself, it's a Gemara mitzvah and it deserves a bracha, but nevertheless, the essence of Sefira is that yesterday was such and such a number, and today is such and such a number. It's a whole brilliant understanding. It's a new analysis.
So, but let me ask you. Let's say, okay, now we'll tie together two things: COVID and Sefirat HaOmer. So a guy wakes up out of a coma, and now he's missed 11 days. So he'd count today with a bracha and kind of count all 10 days backwards afterwards?
Could be.
It has to start from one. He doesn't go backwards.
And if he wakes up on day 49, he's going to take him a few minutes to count the Omer.
Yeah. But he doesn't start with the first, with 11. He's got to start with 1. No, he's got to count. That's
what David is saying.
No, David said. Did you not say, David? He counts 11 and then he counts backward.
Oh,
then he counts.
I said either way. I mean,
I think it would be more sensible, like you said, Joe. I don't think David would disagree with that. That
Okay.
he would have to say 11 days ago was 1, and 10 days ago was 2, and 11 and 9 days ago was 3, etc.
And then say the bracha by the last one.
Correct.
Just today's thing. Okay.
Because that's going to be the clincher of the mitzvah. That today is the 11th day of the Omer. I assume even in Canada it's the 11th day of the Omer.
Just Australia.
Okay. If the mitzvah based is to count the weeks, so why do we count weeks? In other words, if we just said
why what?
11, the mitzvah base is to count weeks, right? So then why do we include that when we say the bracha? I mean, all we have is count as days.
So that's already touches on the relationship between Sefirat d'Oraisa and Sefirat d'Rabbanan. Sefirat d'Rabbanan, like, I don't know if you've seen it in some Sidurim, it says, Harachmanu yachzer lanu es beis hamigdash koma.
Yeah,
and that formula really is what's called Zeichel Migdash.
Right.
And what we try to do is we try as much as we can to duplicate the mitzvah as it was performed in the Migdash. So it's not enough to count days, which of course is Fartem Tisperush Chamishim Yom, as we discussed at great length, but there's also going to be an obligation as Zeichel and Migdash to count the weeks. As if we were Bezdin. You know what I mean? I'm playing the role of Bezdin.
Right, because there's no Bezdin.
Because there is no Bezdin. But as if, when the Migdash stood and there was a Bezdin and we were counting in order to sanctify the 50th day as Shavuos, I'm going to remind myself of that. I once heard, by the way, from Herschel Shecht, something very interesting. The Goyim, Lahavdil, have names for all of our holidays in Latin. And inevitably, they mess up. He said they got one right, and that's Pentecost.
Yeah, it's 50.
Yeah, that's the only one they got right, because that is what Chag HaShavuos is all about. It's about the number 50, as we saw today.
Yeah.
Okay, Rabbosai?
Okay, thank you very much, Rav.
Thank you.
But let me ask you one more thing. Not the other. So the pages you asked me to send out, do you really mean till 219 or to 215? Because 216 is the next chapter or something like that.
Yeah, I wanted to go a little bit into the next chapter, not too much.
Okay, I thought that was a possibility.
Just get a head start. You know my philosophy or my psychology more, that I'm always afraid we'll run out of pages. So, and in truth, the pages you sent out, David, will probably last us for a month.
Okay.
Till like HaOmer. Ooh, I shouldn't have counted. Now I can't count like HaOmer with a bracha.
Okay.
Okay, then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or as one of my Yekisha buddies pointed out, HaOmer. Instead of HaOmer.
Very good.
Or he